Dad, Mila and I think the trip should just be the three of us. You understand, right? It's important for our nuclear family. We'll all do something together another time. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. Just that message, lighting up my phone while I stood in my driveway with a travel bag in my hand. I read it once, then again, then a third time. The words didn't soften. They hardened. They pressed against me like cold steel. The late day light was still warm on my face, but inside, something dropped slowly, heavily into a place I didn't want to look at. The bag slipped from my fingers and hit the concrete with a dull thud. I didn't even flinch. I just stared down at the phone, the glow reflecting against the screen like it was illuminating a truth I'd been avoiding for far too long. Just the three of us. Their nuclear family. And I was… what? The extra? The burden? The ghost hovering at the edge of the picture? I stood there for a long moment, listening to the faint sounds of my neighborhood, the distant hum of a lawnmower, a kid laughing somewhere down the block. Life moved normally around me, untouched by the sentence that had just cracked something deep inside my chest. I picked up the travel bag slowly and walked back toward the house. No dramatic moment, no trembling hands, just a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years, the sort of quiet that doesn't comfort, it warns. Inside, the house carried its usual stillness, a widower's stillness. Linda's photos sat above the mantel, catching the last slant of evening light. Her smile looked steady, grounded. I touched the frame as I passed, not because it helped, but because habit is a kind of love that stays even when the person is gone. My phone buzzed again. Dad, our cards are maxed. Can we put food and excursions on yours? We'll pay you back. Maybe if the first message hadn't been so sharp, I would have laughed. Maybe I would have told myself they were just overwhelmed, stressed, young parents doing their best. I'd made excuses like that for years. But this time, something shifted inside me, something subtle, but unmistakable. It didn't feel like confusion. It felt like clarity. I walked into the garage, flicked on the light, and set the bag on the workbench beside the unfinished birdhouse I'd been carving for Noah. Sawdust still clung to the edges, soft as fine snow. I had imagined handing it to him on that cruise, watching his eyes light up the way they always did when I built him something with my own hands. Now I wasn't even invited. That was the moment, the exact second, when the warm ache in my chest changed temperature. Grief cooled into something firmer, something with edges. Not rage, not bitterness, just awareness. I sat on the stool, opened the drawer beneath the bench, and pulled out a stack of travel documents I'd printed weeks ago. The cruise confirmation, the upgraded suite, the private whale-watching excursion I booked because Noah loved orcas. Every line reminded me how certain I'd been that this trip would mean something. Over $19,000, all charged to my card. I set the papers down and stared at the grain of the wooden birdhouse, the soft lines, the small imperfections, the care in every cut. You understand, right? The words echoed again, louder now, sharp enough to sting. I walked back into the kitchen and opened my laptop, not for answers but for grounding. The cold light of the screen reflected against the window, turning it into a dark mirror where I could see myself tired, older than 63 should look, but still steady. Still, someone who believed that love meant showing up. I clicked into my email without thinking and scrolled. And then, buried under receipts and newsletters I never read, a subject line caught my eye. Once the house is fully in our name. I froze. The cursor hovered. Every instinct told me to close the laptop, make a cup of tea, step outside, breathe. Pretend this was nothing. Pretend this was just another piece of clutter in an inbox full of years I still hadn't sorted through since Linda died. But something in me refused. Something that had been quiet too long finally lifted its head. So I clicked. The message opened fast. A bright rectangle, cutting into the dim room. Just a few sentences. Nothing poetic. Just honesty, raw, unfiltered, not meant for me. And with each line I read, something inside my chest pulled tighter. Not anger. Not disbelief. Just understanding. Understanding of how long this had been happening. Understanding of how easily good intentions become a trap. Understanding that somewhere along the line, I had stopped being a father and become a resource. When I closed the email, the room felt smaller, the walls closer. I leaned back in my chair and let the truth settle. Not like a weights can be lifted, but like a realization, a shift, a line being drawn slowly, carefully, across the years behind me. If this was where they wanted to stand, then I needed to decide where I would stand. I reached for the folder again, the one with the cruise papers, the one that symbolized everything I thought this family still was. I slid it aside. Then I opened the credit card portal. Then the statements. And with each click, each page, each charge I didn't recognize, the quiet inside me grew sharper, more defined. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. I don't know how long I sat there with that laptop open, the screen glowing in the dim kitchen like a silent accusation. Eventually, the light outside faded, and the window turned into a dark mirror, my reflection staring back at me. Older than I remembered, more tired than I had any right to be. I closed the computer gently, almost with respect for the truth it had just shown me, and slid it aside. I tried to breathe. Steady, slow, but the air felt different now. Thicker, heavier, like the whole house was holding its breath with me. There's something that happens when you finally recognize a pattern you've refused to see for years. It isn't an explosion. It's a quiet collapse, the kind that makes you wonder how many times you looked away, how many excuses you built just to keep loving someone who was drifting further and further out of reach. I walked to the sink, poured myself a glass of water, and drank half of it without tasting a thing. The taste didn't matter. What mattered was the question forming so clearly in my mind it felt like a nail being tapped into wood. How long have I been funding a life I wasn't even allowed to be part of? The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. Every memory of the past 5 years came rushing like a film played too fast. Aaron saying they needed help with the down payment. Mila telling me daycare was too expensive. The time they said the car repair was an emergency, only for me to see photos later of them at a mountain lodge. And through it all, I kept telling myself it was just young parents struggling. I kept believing their gratitude meant something. Maybe it had. Once. I went back into the garage with the birdhouse still waiting on the workbench. The scent of cedar usually comforted me, but now it just reminded me how much of myself I had poured into this family. Every shaving on the floor, every hand-sanded edge, every late-night project I'd made for Noah. I had built and built and built, and all the while, someone else had been dismantling me one piece at a time. I wiped sawdust from my palms, then headed to the small safe in the corner of the garage, where I kept older paperwork, things I hadn't touched since Linda passed. I hadn't planned on opening it that night, but grief has a way of nudging you toward answers you're not ready for. Inside sat folders I hadn't touched in years. Bills, tax records, a small envelope of Linda's handwriting. I pushed those gently aside and pulled out the folder labeled Home Mortgage. When Aaron had asked me to co-sign 3 years ago, I remembered reading every page carefully, or I thought I did. I flipped through the documents now, page by page, the fluorescent garage light humming faintly overhead. And then I saw at another line, where my signature was printed. The stroke was close, very close, but the tail on the last S curved too sharply. I knew my own handwriting the way a musician knows the feel of his own instrument. A cold pulse went through me. I grabbed the copy of the other signed loan from the bench, held them side by side. It was subtle, so subtle most people wouldn't notice, but it wasn't my hand. And if someone was willing to forge my signature once, who's to say it happened only once? Something in my chest tightened. Fear, anger, maybe a mixture of both. I stepped back from the workbench. My breath caught. What else was forged? I hadn't meant to search the whole garage, but I did slowly, methodically. I checked every drawer, every envelope. And then, tucked inside a yellow folder I didn't recognize, I found something else. A printout of a bank email from months ago, addressed to me, but forwarded to Aaron's old Gmail account. A message explaining that my emergency credit card was nearing its limit. I never saw this message. I stared at the page as if it could explain itself. There's a moment when suspicion becomes fact, and when that happens, something inside you steadies. The fear drains, leaving a sharpness behind. A clarity that almost feels like relief. I looked around the garage again. Nothing had changed in the room, but everything had changed in me. I walked into the house and opened the credit card portal on my laptop. I expected a few $100s, maybe a couple thousand. What I saw instead made my throat go dry. $28,000. Restaurants. Boutique shops. A luxury weekend in Vancouver. A laptop from a brand I didn't even recognize. Subscription renewals. Car detailing. Spa packages. My name. My card. My debt. Not an emergency in sight. As I scrolled, something else caught my eye. 3 charges for kids' items at a sporting goods store. And for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe these were for Noah. Maybe this was one small corner of their spending that came from a place of love. But even that was short-lived. The dates didn't match any birthdays or holidays, and the items listed weren't the things Noah liked. They were adult hiking gear. For a trip I wasn't invited to. My hand hovered over the trackpad. I clicked, next month. Then, next. Then, next. Watching the dollar amounts stack like a wall between me and the life I thought I had. When I reached the top of the screen, something inside me snapped, not violently, but decisively. Like a wooden beam, finally giving under pressure. It's held for years. I stood from the table and walked to the window. Outside, dusk had settled over the neighborhood. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Across the street, a family gathered around a fire pit, their laughter drifting like faint music. For a moment, I watched them, feeling the weight of everything I lacked, everything I had lost. Linda would tell me to breathe. She'd tell me to stand up straight. She'd remind me that dignity is the last thing you give away. I whispered into the quiet room. I'm done being useful. The words surprised me, but they felt right. Solid. Like the first stroke of a new signature. My signature. I grabbed the laptop again and refreshed the credit card page. There it was. The emergency card. The one I had given Aaron. Just in case. I hovered the cursor over the cancel card button. My finger hesitated. Only for a moment. Then I clicked. The confirmation chimed softly. I closed the laptop and exhaled. A slow, steady release of 5 years of exhaustion. And somewhere in that breath, I realized. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was reclamation. The first step back toward myself. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the house shift around me, the way old houses do. Wood settling. Pipes sighing. I'd lived in this place for nearly 30 years, long enough to memorize every sound. But that night, everything felt unfamiliar. Even the silence felt different, like it wasn't part of the house anymore, but part of me. By the time dawn pushed pale light through the blinds, I knew I couldn't carry this alone. I made coffee strong. Black. The way Linda used to tease me about, and sat at the table staring into the mug as if the answers might surface there. Then I picked up my phone and called the only person I trusted with something like this. Lawrence? It's me. I need help. 20 minutes later, his old Subaru rolled into my driveway. He stepped out. Same steady posture as always. Wearing one of those wool coats that look like they belong on a man who's seen every kind of storm, and learned to walk through each one carefully. We shook hands, and he studied my face for a beat. You look like hell, Elliot. I feel worse. He didn't push. He just followed me inside, set his coat over the chair, and waited. That's the thing about real friends. They give you space for the truth to walk out in its own time. I opened the laptop, pulled up the emails, then the forged signature, then the credit card statements. Each time, his face tightened just a fraction more. And each time, I felt something inside me ease, like by showing him, I was finally acknowledging it was real. When the last document was in front of him, he leaned back. This isn't small, he said quietly. This is a pattern. And it's been going on for a while. It's my son, I whispered. My only son. He nodded. I know. And that's why we're going to handle this right. Carefully. Methodically. I swallowed hard. I don't want to ruin his life. You're not, he said. They've been ruining yours. What you're doing now is taking it back. There was a moment, just a moment, when I nearly broke. But instead, I breathed. In, out, slow. Lawrence pulled a small notepad from his coat pocket. We're going to document everything. Every charge, every message, every signature. We'll build a timeline. A timeline for what? For whatever this becomes. His tone wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even emotional. It was factual. And that steadiness grounded me more than he knew. We started with the credit card, listing each charge, grouping them by month. Then the emails, timestamps, subject lines, screenshots, printed and labeled. The forged signature came next. Lawrence studied the 2 samples under the bright kitchen light, tracing the curves with a pen without touching the paper. See this? He said softly. The pressure points don't match. Someone mimicked your movement but didn't understand the rhythm of your hand. How can you tell? Because forgery always reveals itself in confidence. Pretending to be someone else's hand requires hesitation, and hesitation leaves marks. I stared at the paper. The hesitation was there clear now, bold even, but I'd never seen it before. Because I didn't want to see it. How bad does this look legally? I finally asked. He didn't answer right away. He folded his hands, nodded to himself, then met my eyes. Elliot, this could fall under elder financial exploitation. Possibly forgery. Maybe more, depending on what else we find. Something flickered across my chest. Fear, maybe, or shame. I wasn't sure. I only knew it stung. I don't want Noah caught in the middle of this. And he won't be, Lawrence promised. But you need to protect yourself. And you need to protect your relationship with him. They may try to use him to pressure you. Pressure me. The way Aaron once used to tug on my sleeve when he was little, asking for just one more bedtime story. The way Noah does now, curling into my side when I help him with homework. God. Children shouldn't have to navigate adult messes. But here we were. Lawrence flipped to a new page. Tell me everything they've said about the cruise. I told him. Every word of the text messages. The tone. The shift from guilt to dismissal. The moment Aaron said it would be too strenuous for me at my age. Lawrence shook his head slowly. This wasn't an accident, he said. This was intentional distancing. The phrase landed like a stone. Intentional distancing. I'd spent 5 years inching closer to them, and they had spent 5 years moving away. We gathered the rest of the documents. I found a crumpled envelope with a childcare invoice, one I'd never paid, though Aaron had insisted I had. Lawrence scanned it, brow furrowed. This signature is closer, he said. But look, the slant shifts halfway through. It's 2 strokes layered together. My stomach turned. How many times? I whispered. How many times did he do this? We'll find out. We moved to the living room. I showed him the birdhouse, the soft cedar edges. He lifted it gently, studying the small dovetail joints. You built something with care, he said. That's who you are. They've been treating you like a resource, not a person. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't accusatory. It was factual. And hearing it put into words felt like something splintering inside me. A quiet moment passed. Then Lawrence set the birdhouse down carefully. Do you want to see something that might make things clearer? He asked. What? He pulled out his phone, tapped twice, then handed it to me. My neighbor's daughter is a private investigator. She taught me this trick. Type your name into this database, public property records. Let's see if anything unusual appears. I typed. My hands shook. A list came up. Most of it was normal. But then, buried near the bottom, one entry made my blood run cold. My name appeared on a document transferring temporary decision-making authority in emergencies. To Aaron. I had never signed such a thing. My vision blurred at the edges. I set the phone down, breath-catching. Why? Why would he need this? Lawrence didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because the truth was already there, rising slowly, painfully, into focus. This wasn't a single betrayal. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't stress or desperation or youthful stupidity. This was a pattern, a structure, a slow, deliberate shift of power, away from me, toward them. Lawrence touched my shoulder. The next step is clear. You call the bank. You call your pension office. You secure everything that still belongs to you. And then, when you're ready, we take this into the open. I nodded, my throat tight. And, Elliot, he added, voice low, careful. Be prepared for what you'll find next. People who take advantage rarely stop at just one layer. I didn't know then how right he was. I didn't want things to go public. God knows I didn't. But the truth has a way of dragging itself into the light whether you invite it or not. And once Lawrence helped me lock down my accounts, freeze the emergency card, alert the pension office, to place flags on anything requiring my signature, it was only a matter of time before Aaron and Mila realized something was happening. The call came less than 24 hours later. It wasn't a conversation. It was an explosion. Mila's voice cracked through the speakerphone like sharpened glass, accusing me of everything from ruining their vacation to trying to control their family. Aaron was in the background, pleading for her to calm down, but she just grew louder, angrier, more desperate than I'd ever heard her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. I simply told them, if we're going to talk about this, it needs to be done in person, with everything on the table. Silence. And then Mila, her voice like ice melting on metal. Fine. Tomorrow. Community hall. Bring whatever you think you have. As if the truth were some burden I was dragging behind me. That night, sleep hovered just out of reach again. I sat at the kitchen table. Stacks of printed emails, statements, forged documents arranged in quiet rows, waiting like witnesses. The house seemed to listen with me. The refrigerator hummed softly. The ticking clock felt too loud, too fast. At dawn, I took a long shower, stood under the water until it stopped feeling like a shield. When I stepped out, I saw something in the mirror that surprised me. A steadiness. A man bracing himself, not for battle, but for truth. I packed everything into a single leather folder. The one Linda bought me when I retired from teaching. She'd said, "You'll need this when you do something important." I never thought this would be what she meant, but maybe she somehow saw the kind of man I'd need to become. At the community hall, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Metal chairs scraped the floor as people settled into the space we'd reserved. Mila arrived first, full makeup, sunglasses indoors. The performance already beginning. Aaron followed behind her, shoulders tight, eyes darting toward the folder under my arm. Lawrence placed a comforting hand on my back. "You speak first," he murmured. Not to accuse, just to show. I nodded. We sat at opposite ends of a long folding table. Mila crossed her arms. Aaron wouldn't sit still. "You wanted a meeting," she snapped. "So talk." I opened the folder. The rustle of paper sounded louder than it should have in the empty room. I started with the least contentious things, the credit card statements. Mila waved her hand dismissively. "We told you those were emergencies." "For a spa weekend?" I asked quietly. "Luxury hiking gear? A hotel in Vancouver?" She shifted in her seat. "You don't understand." Aaron cut in. "Dad. Okay. Maybe we didn't communicate well. But you know how things get. Young families. Stress. We meant to pay you back." I slid the next set of documents across the table. The forged signature. Mila froze. Aaron's face drained of color so fast it looked like someone pulled the life right out of him. "This isn't my handwriting," I said. "Not even close." It's a misunderstanding," Aaron stammered. "It must have been auto-signed, or..." "Auto-signed?" Lawrence said calmly. "On a legal document requiring a physical signature?" Aaron swallowed. "And this?" I placed the emergency authority form in front of them. "When did I sign this? Tell me the date. Tell me the room I was in. Tell me the pen I used." Neither of them spoke. That silence, it wasn't empty. It was full, so full it felt like a wall closing in. Mila broke first. "You're twisted. You're trying to trap us. You're staging all of this because you hate me and want to break up my family." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Lawrence slid the printed email thread onto the table. The one where they discussed phasing me out. The one where I was useful. For now. The one where they planned to take the house once everything was in their name. Mila's sunglasses slipped down her nose. That was venting, she snapped. People say things when they're upset. You said them for months, I replied softly. Not once. Aaron reached for the pages with shaking hands. Dad, we didn't mean. That's the problem, Aaron, I said. You did mean it. You just didn't expect me to see it. He flinched. Then the door creaked. We all turned. Noah stood in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes wide and confused. Behind him was my sister, hand resting on his small shoulder. She must have arrived early to pick up something from the hall and walked straight into the storm. Dad, he whispered, looking at Aaron. Why did you tell me Grandpa didn't want to see me anymore? Mila stiffened. Aaron's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. The quiet in that room was different than before. Not heavy, not sharp, just devastating. Lawrence stepped forward gently. Noah, why don't you wait outside for a moment? But the boy kept his eyes on his father, searching for something truth, maybe, or the version of his dad he believed in. I watched Aaron crumble. His knees seemed to weaken, his voice cracked. I didn't mean it like that, buddy. We were just going through things. But you lied, Noah whispered. And there it was, the purest thing in the room, calling everything by its name. Mila stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I'm done with this circus. Her voice pitched high with panic. Elliot thinks he knows everything, but he's just trying to take control back because he's old and lonely. Mila, Aaron snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him. Stop. She froze mid-stride. He looked at her, then at the evidence on the table, then at his son. And something inside him shifted. I could feel it from across the room. Lawrence whispered to me, "This is the moment. The exposure. Let it happen." Aaron sank into the chair, head in his hands. Dad, I'm sorry. I don't know how we got here. I don't know why I let it go this far. But Mila wasn't done. She pointed at me with a trembling hand. You're not taking control of this family. Not now. Not ever. I'll get a lawyer. I'll prove you forged all of this. She stumbled to a halt when she saw the person standing behind me. Judge Whitaker, a community mediator, visiting the hall early for another meeting. She'd overheard enough, her expression said everything. Mila, she said firmly, I suggest you stop talking. The air in the room shifted again, and this time, it shifted in my favor. Given what I've heard, the judge said carefully, it might be wise for all of you to prepare for a formal review. This isn't a disagreement. This is a legal matter. Mila backed toward the door, wild-eyed. Aaron couldn't look at anyone. Noah clutched his backpack, eyes glossy. And I stood there, steady, feeling the weight of truth settle exactly where it was meant to. The drive home after that meeting felt heavier than it should have. Maybe it was the Oregon sky turning that dull gray. Or maybe it was finally admitting a truth I'd avoided for years. Sometimes the people you love don't just slip away. They choose to. And eventually, you have to choose yourself. I set the folder of documents on my kitchen table and sat in the silence. Silence can punish you or clarify you. That night, it did both. Memories of Aaron as a boy. Hockey, mornings, birthday candles. The way he'd fall asleep on my chest flashed against newer memories. Distance, entitlement, and the slow erosion of respect. It didn't erase my love for him, but it changed what that love meant, and that was harder to face than anything else. 2 days later, the court notice arrived. I expected fear. Instead, I felt steady. Lawrence helped gather every document, charges, forged signatures, emails without judgment, just truth. On the morning of the hearing, I put on the old cedar-scented suit Linda bought me years ago. I needed something grounding. At the courthouse, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead while Aaron sat hunched, and Mila stood rigid, jaw tight. Noah wasn't with them. Judge Whitaker reviewed everything carefully. When she finally looked up, her disappointment cut deeper than anger would have. A family is built on trust, she said, and what I see here is manipulation and misuse. Mr. Graves has shown consistent love and involvement. The law will protect that. Then came the ruling. 1 weekday evening, every other weekend. non-negotiable. Interfere again, and there would be fines or jail. And then the unexpected. Mandatory family therapy. Afterward, in the hallway, Aaron stopped me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I don't have the words." "Then don't use words," I told him. "Use actions." The months that followed were slow, uneven rebuilding. Therapy was raw and uncomfortable. Mila resisted everything until she stopped coming altogether. A few weeks later, Aaron told me she'd moved out. "I want to be better," he said quietly. Maybe for the first time, I believed him. Noah thrived. Our court-ordered visits became a rhythm: homework nights, weekend hikes, small woodworking projects in the garage. The treehouse we eventually built became more than lumber and paint. It was proof that love rebuilt from honesty is stronger than love maintained through obligation. A year after the message that broke me, Noah and I took our own trip, Vancouver Island. On the shoreline, watching orcas rise through the mist, he whispered, "I'm glad we're here." "So am I told him. "More than you know." As the waves erased our footprints, I finally understood. Losing the family you thought you had can make space for the family you can still build. Justice is clarity. Justice is freedom. Justice is choosing yourself after years of choosing everyone else. Tell me, would you forgive them? Or would you choose justice? Subscribe for the next true Canadian family story. What city are you listening from tonight?